Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right then. So hello Kapua. My name is Miguel. I'm one of the tech leads for the GDSCUA, otherwise known as Google Developer Student Clubs at the University of Arizona. And like the goal for today's interview is just to like know about your internship and like your experience. Maybe get to know some tips or tricks that you might have for other students that are trying to land that first opportunity. So yeah, without further ado, I'm just gonna go ahead and get right into it with the first question.
Okay.
So like when it comes to your experience and like you're studying computer science, like what has been your experience as a female in the CS major, and like what advice would you have for other females interested in CS?
Um, that's an interesting question because it comes from, there's a lot of ways to look at it. And I've been interested in science and technology since I was 11, since middle school. And right off the bat, I was made aware of, this male dominated field. And it was never in a negative light. It was never something that I was told that I needed to overcome, or something that was innately bad. It was just a fact, like, hey, this is something that you need to be aware of. And
Mhm.
so right from the get-go, I was always aware that I was a minority in this group. And so it wasn't, a surprising factor or like a shock when I started my university courses, and 9 times out of 10, I was the only girl in like a group of 4 or 5.
Yeah.
And when I started my internship, I was the only girl. One, I was the only intern, but also I was the only female on the team, and there was 15 people on the team. And it's always been something I've been comfortable with. And it's not something that, I try to identify myself in. Like, yes, on paper, I am a female and I am a programmer, but I really try to shy away from, being a woman in STEM, because I don't want to be applauded or, celebrated because I am a female coder. I want to be congratulated and celebrated because I'm good at my job and I'm good at what I do. So I really try to keep those things separate.
Oh, okay.
That being said, it can sometimes be a little bit difficult, because, this is a discipline where it's just innately difficult. Everyone struggles with it. And when you are feeling down on your luck or imposter syndrome hits you, finding any difference between you and those you consider successful is way too easy to do. And oftentimes gender is like one of the very first things that come to play is, oh, like, yes, I know I'm not the only one having these emotions, but I am the only one who identifies this way. And so that can sometimes be lonely and isolating, and really is what like the biggest struggle is. And so that's kind of like my experience with that.
Okay. Yeah, that was definitely a good answer. I feel like I wanted to start things off with that. Not necessarily doesn't gear towards your internship per se, but just overall, since your experience when it comes to the CS major. So like now, as far as your internship in itself, like where do you intern, and like for how long have you interned there for?
So I am a software engineer intern for the records management systems team at Axon Enterprise. And Axon is the company that creates and monitors and builds, maintains police and law enforcement and first responder technologies and equipments. Our star product, what we kind of are really known, what we are well known for, are tasers. So
Okay.
a lot of our development is in, tasers and non-lethal weapons. However, we also create online portals and software for first responders or those in law enforcement or justice systems to use. We also do a lot in surveillance and body cameras. Something that is in development is police trainings. So we're working on, using virtual reality systems, training potential officers and new officers, in an immersive field versus just studying out of a textbook. And so that's kind of where I work and what, I do.
Okay.
And I started my internship with them in the summer of 2020.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like you touched base on a couple of things that I wanted to know, like in terms of what you do and like what have you been exposed to. You kind of briefly touched on those things when it comes to just explaining the company in itself. So I guess now for like when it comes to your interview, and I think what I mean most students maybe want to know is like what was your interview like, and like what advice, like what do you have for other students, like any specific techniques that you use to prepare and answer the questions, or the what type of interview was there different phases maybe, can you just elaborate on your interview and as a whole on what it was like?
Yeah. So I got this internship, like I said, in the summer of 2020. And when I was applying, I was in my second semester of college. So I was still a freshman, still really early on. There are
Yeah.
very few opportunities for freshmen, and sometimes even sophomores, to really get their foot in the door that aren't, freshman specific programs.
Hmm.
Um, and so my strategy when I was applying was to mass apply to as many places as possible. I had applied to, I think it was 40 plus places at the time. And out of those 40 plus applications, I heard back from three, um, for soft skills interviews, which is, where you talk to the manager or where you talk to, the recruitment person, and you just have a conversation about, you know, what are your strengths, or tell us a time about blank. You just have that like very soft skills
Mm.
um, interview. And I did that with Axon. And I had initially applied to Axon because I was getting a little bit panicky about
Yeah.
applications because, I wasn't expecting anything, but I was still hoping. And so I remember I had done a tour of Axon when I was in high school, for an
Mm.
unrelated reason. Um, and I reached out to the person who I remember gave us the tour, because him and I had, had really good conversations. And I reached out to him on LinkedIn and I was like, hey, I don't know if you remember me, but I am so and so, and I'm wondering if there's any opportunities for an internship this summer. And he connected me to my manager, who like then put me through the interview process. So I didn't traditionally apply to Axon like most people would. I definitely went through the networking route.
Okay.
Um, and so I did my soft skills interview where we just chatted and talked. And then the next step was a technical interview, where I was given, two or three problems, and I had to solve that on camera or with somebody who was, grading me and seeing how I approach skills. And that was definitely the hardest part of the interview. I don't think I solved either of the problems they gave me. Um,
Okay.
but it was definitely like the most stressful part. And then
Yeah.
the next step, would have been a in-person interview, at the office that got canceled because, during my interview process, it was when the pandemic was first hitting. And so they had canceled that and was just saying, like, hey, we'll reach out to you, we'll let you know. Um, and I didn't have a lot of high hopes because, I didn't complete the technical portions. I was a freshman who had no experience. Like, I had very little hopes for it. But, I ended up did landing, and I have no idea how I did that.
Yeah.
Um,
Congratulations.
Thank you. But something, like in retrospect, that I think a lot of students undervalue is, one, networking. Like, I wouldn't have been able to get my foot in the door at all if I didn't know somebody there. The second thing is soft skills go a long way. Yes, you can be the smartest person on the planet, but people are like, you're gonna have to work with people. And if your manager can't see himself wanting to, mentor you, then you're not gonna get hired. Um, and then the third thing that I really leveraged as a freshman, which I had, I was able to do that upperclassmen wouldn't, is that I expressed an interest to want to work there after I graduate. Meaning, I would intern my freshman year and I showed interest and the potential and the possibility to want to come back in future years. So that way,
Mm.
when I graduate, I was a, essentially fully trained employee that they wouldn't have to start from scratch training. And they did that, using intern pay, which saves them a lot of money. And seniors and juniors can't leverage that because, they don't have that time to get trained as well as I could have done. So that was something I really leveraged was, hey guys, if this goes really well, I can see myself coming back and wanting to be part of this team even more. And that's exactly what happened. I'm on my third round of internship with Axon, and
Mhm.
each time I get progressively better and
Yeah.
want to, more likely work for them full time once I graduate.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a great answer. I feel like since you did touch on a few things, like for example, networking and soft skills, which I think is to some extent overlooked by some students. I feel like this question may be a little bit redundant, but just in case, just to see whether or not you did, since you were like just looking for an internship at this time or at the time that you secured your internship, like did you use like any of the services offered at the U of A to find and secure your internship, like during just maybe prepping your resume or preparing for your behavioral questions? Like, did you utilize any of the services that the U of A provides specifically, or was it mostly just like yourself and maybe people that you know? Can you touch on that?
Yeah, it was definitely mostly myself. And how and that's just because like I'm a very independent person and I
Yeah.
use a lot of online resources though. So although, I can do the things, I definitely did use, online U of A resources on like tips and tricks to do this. And when I was applying, like mass applying, I definitely used, the UA or the CS career fair that they offer each semester.
Hmm.
One of my, three callbacks stemmed from this career fair there. And I used Arthur, when I went to, I scheduled a meeting with him and I was like, hey, I have these things coming up. I don't know what to expect. Can you like give me a debriefing on like what should I expect going into this? Um, and so although it was mainly like my own motivation and like self push and drive, I definitely did utilize some U of A services.
Oh yeah, that's great. I mean, like, and when it comes to like your resume, being that you did say that it was mostly done by yourself, which is very impressive. I feel like could you touch like on like what are some things that you think, or maybe now that you have more experience, you probably like have gained this knowledge. Like, what are some things that you think made your resume stand out? Because I do know that, I mean, it may or may not apply because you did say that you did utilize that networking and stuff. But are there any things that you think that made your resume stand out, or any mistakes or red flags that students should avoid when working on their resumes?
Yeah, so I've done a lot. So like, yes, I've worked on my resume myself. However, I've also done a lot of workshops and classes on how a good resume
Right.
works. And the biggest thing is a resume is a single page document. You don't expand your resume to over one page unless you are Bill Gates or Albert Einstein. And even them, I'm pretty sure only had one page resumes.
Yeah.
Um, but this means that real estate is important. You don't want to waste a line on the page for some arbitrary information that really doesn't matter when you could be using that space for something else. So, having a mailing address on your resume probably isn't super useful. And that's 4 or 5 lines that you've just wasted that you could be using to describe something else. Or not formatting it in the most efficient way. So, having columns instead of, just individual rows, because typically you can put in a lot of information in a single line on your resume. If you do it,
Hmm.
like I know on my current resume, I have a single line that has like 3 different bits of information on it, but I have it spaced out so there are different sections. And the further you go down, I start using the traditional like paragraph row format a little bit more, but I don't waste space. You want as little white space on your resume as possible.
Hmm.
I think is like the biggest thing because you want as much information as possible, but you want it to be relevant and interesting to, what you're doing. You want to customize your resume to whatever company you're applying to at any given point.
Okay. Yeah, those are very good things to keep in mind, I think, for most students, or I mean any student. But I mean, as far as like, because you've been interning with this company for a while, so I feel like this is something that could many other students could face, especially when they land their first opportunity. Like, have you ever been affected by imposter syndrome? And like, if so, like, what advice do you have for students who might feel inadequate?
Yeah, I definitely have been infected by imposter syndrome, both in and outside the workplace, in the classroom and
Okay.
outside. It is something that I struggle with almost daily, really. And, something that I try to do to overcome that is, if I wasn't me, if I was some random person and I was talking to me, right? If I was talking to this random person and I was hearing, my story, or I was hearing the things that I did, what would I tell this random person? And most of the time, it's a lot nicer than the things I'm actually telling myself.
Mm,
I know that I am a successful human. I know that I have done impressive things, and I need to not hold myself up to such a high standard. And so when I write out my achievements or my accomplishments, then I can see, like, oh yeah, like I have all these things. And if I was, talking to someone who was in my exact same shoes, I would be telling them to, let loose, like, you are great. Um, and at least for me specifically, a lot of my imposter syndrome comes and stems from the fact of how other people view me. I know that, like, we shouldn't care about how others perceive ourselves, but we're still
yeah.
human, and it still happens. And I know that for personally, my imposter syndrome, and a lot of mine, definitely stems from, oh, they're judging me for so and so, or they don't think I'm this and that. Um, but then I remember that, like, when I look at someone who's successful, I just see at a very face value thing. They got an A in the class. That is all I see. I don't know how they did it. I don't know why they did it. I don't know any of the details beyond it. I just know that it is a fact. And the exact same thing can be said from those people to me. They don't know about any of my background. They don't know, how, why, or what, or they do know what. They don't know how, why. They know is that this is a thing. And so they don't have, the extra knowledge it takes for me to get stressed about myself.
Yeah.
And so I can then use that as, like, okay, I'm overthinking this, calm down. People aren't judging you, for these things, because they don't know these things. Um, and so I definitely use a lot of, like, extra, I don't like,
Like positive
uh,
self-talk.
right, exactly. To kind of hone myself back in.
Yeah, that's great. That's something to definitely keep in mind, I feel, for most people, because even outside, I mean, just in CS, being that it's so stressful at times, sometimes you do feel inadequate at times. I definitely know people have talked to me about this, just casually, and it is could be looked at as a problem, but the things that you said are definitely things to keep in mind, I think. Um, and then, like, when it comes to, like, it's something that I think I haven't really touched on much, but like, to with your future career and this internship, like, how well do you think this internship is preparing you for your future career? And, like, when it comes to that, like, what are your plans for your future career?
Yeah, so I definitely think that this internship has had a major effect on what I want to do and what I probably will do once I graduate. Going into this internship, I was very honest with, my manager who was hiring me at the time, that, like, hey man, I'm 19, I'm a freshman, I have no idea what I want to do when I graduate in
Yeah.
4 years. And I was very upfront about that. And he was very, like, helpful in, like, all right, well, what do you like? What are the things that are interesting you, or have interested you? Um, and so my internship has really helped me, like, gear towards, I find myself really enjoying doing web development work and front end work specifically. And so, they're giving me that skills, and they're giving me real life practice to, like, do those skills and work on that. That way, when I start working full time,
Hmm.
I automatically have those skills because they help me work towards that. And if I not had this internship, I don't know how or if I would have gotten that exposure in the same degree that I did at Axon. So they've definitely helped me do that. And in regards to, like, what I want to do after I graduate, it's exactly that. I want to do front end development. At the moment, I really do want to work with Axon when I graduate and start working full time. I want to do front end work. I want to work on the team that I have been. Um, and they've been, like, a really strong and powerful influence in that regard.
Awesome, awesome. I feel like just like as you mentioned, front end work. So, like, touching base on that. So, like, what, like, tools or resources do you use specifically, and that you have found the most useful? Like, what languages do you work with? a
So at
framework, like
Axon and
anything.
with my internship, we work in, I work in a lot with JavaScript and
Okay.
specifically React JS. Um, and I didn't know React when I started the internship. I hadn't even heard of React when I started. And so, I was doing a lot of online like tutorials and like crash courses, but I was like first starting off just to get like the gist of like the language. But also, it's like a full system and a full service. So we're not using just React, even though that's the language that I primarily use. We're also using, Python for our backend testing or other
Mhm.
languages at any given point. And so I get exposure and I get, to see and utilize code written in other languages. But what I primarily use on any given day would be React.
Oh, okay. Awesome, awesome. So like moving back to like I guess your academics, because I know you have mentioned that you are looking to work full time with them. But like in terms of like maybe if you would consider like when it comes to your academics, like are you considering higher education like a master's or a PhD, or are you strictly looking more towards going into the workforce after you finish your undergraduate?
Yeah, so at this time, I'm definitely not particularly interested in higher ed.
Mm-hmm.
I know that like growing up and even kind of recently, I've always definitely wanted like, that higher degree or that advanced degree. But that's not something that I'm going to want to pursue directly after graduation. Just because, I'm getting a little fatigued from school and I want like a change of pace. And so I'm definitely going to start, working full
Tell
time.
me about it.
And then when I to the get to a point where I'm like, okay, this is comfortable, then I would definitely reconsider going back and like starting grad school or even maybe a PhD program.
Awesome.
I've, definitely I've researched and I've looked into grad programs already, and there's just none that I've really resonated with enough to want to like change my plans currently. So it's definitely like
Okay.
on my radar, but not something that I'm going to pursue right after I graduate.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, very, very great insight into just your plans and your career. I feel like as for today, that's all the questions that I have for you. Thank you so much for taking this time and being able to just help anybody that's being able to watch this recording. I feel like they're going to get a lot of helpful information from this, and I appreciate your time, Kapua.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
All right, then. Bye.
Bye.